Do you think Harry and Meghan are right to limit the number of children they have to save the planet?
I do. I mean, I'm absolutely astonished that I'm agreeing so much with a royal. I usually disagree quite strongly with them. But if you understand that there are now 7.7 billion people on the planet, that's our world population. And only on Monday, we had Earth Overshoot Day, which is when we've used all the resources that we should properly allocate. It takes us beyond the Earth's capacity to renew its resources. And, if we don't do something like cut down on the number of children we have, then we are some of the planet's biggest spenders.
I have to say, I do find this notion of Earth Overshoot Day. I mean, you realise Thomas Malthus was saying this stuff in the later 1800s, and we were talking about how when the planet had a population of less than a billion human beings, saying, well, we're going to run out of food, there's going to be mass starvation, we can't possibly sustain ourselves. And you realise that with technological advances, and that we've seen massive expansion of the population of the planet in just the last few decades, not even just the last century. And yet we have seen fewer and fewer people on this planet in real terms and percentage terms by a long way are actually starving and missing out. We've seen mass industrialisation and that has meant that people have got more control over the number of children they have, but it also means that children aren't dying, that adults aren't dying when they reach 35. They're living double that and more. In what way do we think there is any evidence to claim that this planet can't sustain the population we've got right now, or indeed a bigger population, with predictions of it hitting 9 or 10 billion before it plateaus out in the next, say, 50 years? What evidence is there that we can't sustain this planet, that population?
Well, clearly, we've come on a long way in scientific terms since the 18th century. We have resources to assess exactly what goes on, whether it's in terms of biodiversity or the numbers of people who are in poverty and the number of people dying from poverty. But when you have 99.9, possibly more than that, actually, scientists on Earth saying we have to do something about climate change, and population is a factor in that.
No, Baroness, no. Come on, I asked you a question. Can you answer the question?
I'm going to answer your question,
okay.
But you covered a lot of territory. You asked a very long question. So when you have that sort of resource exploitation, particularly by rich countries, it is possible that we could find technology that would help us to actually mop up some of the damage that we're doing. I mean, if we invested more in solar, in all sorts of wind power and tidal power, then we could help other nations to reduce their levels of consumption as well. But the fact is, it's going to be quite difficult for technology to keep up with what's happening to the planet. I mean, you must have seen the incredibly damaging weather patterns in the Arctic, where there's constant fires. Our temperatures are going up. This is a real problem we have to face, and we, as the UK, are very heavy consumers of the Earth's resources.
Can I ask you the same question again? Apologies if it was overly long and rambling. What evidence is there that this planet cannot actually sustain the population as it is now and as it is predicted to be? What evidence is there? Given that we know for a fact that the planet has been able to sustain, and not only sustain, has the average person on the planet today is in much better position in terms of poverty, in terms of risk of starvation, in terms of disease, in terms of longevity, chances of death before the age of 5, infant mortality, on every single basis on which you could possibly measure human life, wealth and the like. Humans are doing better. On what basis then can we claim that there is evidence that this Earth cannot sustain the population we have now and are likely to have in the future?
It's what the world scientists are telling us, and personally, I would rather believe
who's saying that? No, there's a difference between... Baron Jenny, do you understand there is a very big difference between saying, look, we're very worried about the environment, we're very worried about pollution and climate change. That's fine, I understand that. What's that got to do with the number of people who are on the planet?
Because we rely on a very small part of the planet called the ecosphere to actually survive. That's where we take all our nutrition, our food, our air,
a very
our
small
clean
part
water.
of the planet?
Yes, it is actually very small, and we are damaging that. Look, the planet's going to survive, all right? We are not going to survive in the same way. We can't possibly, if we keep consuming as fast as we're consuming. We're burning down vast amounts of Amazon, trying to clear food so that we can grow meat for burgers and things like that. When you ask for evidence, virtually every single scientist on the planet is saying we have to cut down our consumption.
But that's not the same as cutting down the number of human beings on the planet.
Well, it is, because
if you're consuming renewable energies, if you're consuming renewable energy, if we move, say, nuclear is renewable, solar, wind, if they get to a point when that can actually be stored, and the technological advances are absolutely extraordinary, exponential at the current time, then that won't be an issue. So why do we think that we can't sustain the population we've got? And how do we go about dealing with that, given that we already know that in virtually every country around the world, population growth has already stalled?
Well, that's not completely true. Population growth is still increasing. It's stalled in some places, like the UK in a sense, because we're actually not quite at reproductive levels, i.e. Replacing the number of people who die. But, oh, by the way, nuclear is not renewable. But the thing is, we are consuming bits of the planet, all right? And if we do that, the planet cannot keep responding and cannot keep replacing those resources. And we in Britain are huge consumers. Every baby born here actually consumes far more than its fair share of the Earth's resources. What we're going to see, because of all these incredible storms and floods and droughts, is that people are going to start to move around the planet. That's going to be absolutely disastrous. So you talk about all these things that have improved, but for some people in some places, it's absolutely not improving. It's getting much, much worse.
But we know that the reason why our population is increasing is not because people are having more children. It used to be the case, even in Britain 100 years ago, no access to contraception. Couples would routinely have 7 or 8 children. 3 or 4 of those would die within the first few months and years of their lives. And that people routinely lived to the ages of 35, if they were lucky, 50. Now it is the case that around the world, including some of the poorest countries in the world like Bangladesh, although some African countries still have got to develop on this, we are looking at a population where people on average are having just over 2 children each per couple, barely replacing the numbers. So we are not seeing any more. People are not having huge numbers of children, but also huge numbers of children are not dying. But the main reason, of course, that population is going up is that we're living longer. People aren't dying at 35, they're living to 70 in many, many countries. They're living to 90 in the Western world. The population is going up because of these amazing medical advances. I certainly plan to get my full innings on this planet. That's a good thing, isn't it? Why are we saying that we should have fewer people on the planet when more people being on the planet is a good thing?
I can't even start to argue with you. Look, the very fact we are living longer means that we consume for longer, and therefore we deplete more and more of the Earth's resources. I don't know how you can look at the constant stream of news from scientists, from academics, that shows that we are in a desperate state. And if we don't do stuff like, for example, not necessarily reduce our population, but at least try to understand that every single child has an impact. And many countries, of course, women don't have the access to sex education, to family planning, and they do have to have multiple births. That's actually, most women don't want to be a baby machine all their lives. They do want to cut down on the children, and we can do it very naturally. I'm talking about free choice. I do not believe for a moment that we should try the Chinese policy of one child. But the fact is, we are consumers, we are consuming too fast, and every single birth actually does make that worse. And every person who lives to 100 makes that worse as well.
So should we start culling people off?
Well, I just said that's not what I'm saying.
No, but you're saying...
But we should be aware of our impact on the planet. We should actually be aware of our consumption patterns. And for example, I talked about Earth Overshoot Day being on July the 29th, on Monday. Actually, in the UK, the day that we passed, what the Earth can replenish was back in May the 17th. We are big consumers. There's all sorts of ways we can cut our consumption, and you're right on all sorts of renewable energy and so on, but we're just not making the moves fast enough, and we need to grow more of our own food. We need to stop flying as much. We need to stop using fossil fuels. and so on.
Do you know what? I just find it so extraordinary. I can't imagine what it must be like to go through life basically as part of a doomsday cult, thinking the world is in such a terrible position. I think understandably be concerned about renewable energy and replacing fossil fuels and cleaner air and polluting the seas and the like. Absolutely, that all makes sense to me. But I find this idea that this view that human beings are effectively sort of parasites on the planet. I think such a depressing thought. I'm really glad that I have a much more positive view of human life than you, Baroness Jenny Jones.